We'd like to welcome you to this afternoon event. This is the Nigeria Economic Summit Group's pre-summit event, which is a roadmap to Nigeria's COP. That's the Committee of Practice at the upcoming COP27. And our theme for this conversation this afternoon is a pragmatic path to net zero using the green economy, blue economy, and forestry. It's been quite a journey for Nigeria and several other countries in the last 5 years on how to achieve the NDCs. And the Economic Summit Group, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, has been at the forefront of sharing knowledge and sharing insight on how Nigeria can further achieve its national determined contribution, and as well draw up some of the best conducive policies and frameworks to help us achieve the net zero. There is so much talk happening around the net zero so far in the last 3 years, but particularly after COVID. In 2021, the IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, reported a code red for humanity, which sounds like disaster, which confirmed that the failure to reduce carbon emission in this decade will make it difficult, for humans to live perfectly well in the next coming decades. There have been a couple of, focus around 2030, 2050, 2070, carbon reduction emissions by different companies, different organizations, and different countries. But it is also believed that if we do not work on what needs to be worked on now, we will see global temperatures rise above 1.5 degrees. Currently, we can see what is happening in Europe. It's as if there's a switch in, weather patterns between, warmer climates like Africa, and that's also in Europe. And then we can see what is happening also in Asia, particularly in Pakistan. If we don't take the necessary steps in the next few years,
so this is coming from Madam Adi.
Prof, can you mute yourself? Thank you.
All right.
All right. So, okay. So, sorry for that little break in transmission. And so again, in November 2021, right, at the COP26 held in Glasgow, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, announced that Nigeria is committed to cutting down its carbon emission. And yes, we are, to net zero by 2060. Is that possible? Yes, I think it's possible. According to Net Tracker, 137 countries out of 198 has made the right net zero pledges, covering over 90% of the global economy, 85% of the world's population, and 88% of world's greenhouse gas emission. The Nigerian government has taken necessary steps to be able to address its plan or her plan to achieving net zero goals. And then one of those steps, if we all pay attention clearly, is that the climate change bill has been passed. So if the climate change bill has been signed into law, this provides as much necessary information and guiding framework into mainstreaming climate actions in Nigeria. And to ensure that implementation happened, the Nigerian government also went far to nominate an industry expert, which many of us in the industry agreed to this nomination, about, that's the DG of the newly formed Climate Change Council, and that's Dr. Salisu Dahiru, who is responsible for making policies, decisions on all matters concerning climate change in Nigeria. And at the forefront of, Dr. Dahiru's work is to ensure that Nigeria's commitment to net zero comes into fruition. Now, the Nigerian government also launched a project in that, to sort of elaborate more on our long-term view on low emissions, development strategy, which is called the long-term strategy, LTS, on low emission development strategy. And this project is aimed, this project aims to design a long-term strategy for us, and how quick and how far do we have before we can achieve it, even though we've put a timeline of 2060. We also know that that there's a long-term vision of 2050, which also has been submitted to the UNFCCC, which was developed as the first contribution towards collaboration on the LTS. That's the long-term strategy. So there's a long-term vision, there's a long-term strategy, right? And so as the world converges in Egypt in this November for the COP27, Nigeria needs to continue its implementation of all its commitment and also scale. So the bottom line of this conversation for today with our panel of very wonderful people is to be able to scale the Nigerians' long-term strategy and then the long-term vision on low emission in Nigeria. And so on that note, I'd like to say welcome everyone to this session of the NESG's conversation on pre-COP summit. And we have a very wonderful agenda ahead of us. Just to kick off this conversation from that, I believe is a short intro to this conversation. I would like to call on a board member of the NESG to give us a welcome address. Please welcome Ms. Ndidi Iwuneli. Over to you, Ndidi. Welcome.
I can't unmute.
Oh, you are now you have been unmuted.
Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. It wasn't letting me. Hi, how are you? It's also not letting me put up video, so I'm just going to go ahead with the speech. Heads of ministries, departments and agencies, captains of industry, heads of associations, donor communities, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the board and management of the NESG, I'm delighted to welcome our distinguished and erudite panelists and our highly esteemed participants to this August event titled Roadmap to Nigeria's COP, a pragmatic path to net zero using the green economy, blue economy and forestry, hosted by the Sustainability Policy Commission of the NESG. This is one of the pre-summit events of the 28th Nigerian Economic Summit, NESG 28, jointly organized by the Nigerian Economic Summit and the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. The event is geared towards engaging stakeholders in a series of virtual conversations and sessions in the weeks leading up to the 28th Nigerian Economic Summit, scheduled to hold from October 24th to 25th, 2022. If you've not registered, kindly please go to nesgroup.org/28 to pre-register now. It promises to be a very, very exciting and action-packed conference. Africa is at crossroads and one of the regions of the world most affected by climate change, as seen in rising temperatures, extreme weather events, and threats from rising sea levels, particularly for coastal cities in West Africa. The continent, being home to 1/6 of the global population, accounts for less than 6% of the global energy consumption and 3% of cumulative global emissions. In November 2021, global leaders and key stakeholders gathered in Glasgow for the 26th Conference of Parties to the UNFCCC, COP26, to discuss several issues ranging from the need for ambitious climate action, deeper cuts in greenhouse gas emissions, enhanced resilience to adapt to the effects of climate change, and financial support for developing countries. Some of the outcomes of COP26 were the adoption of the Glasgow Climate Pact and the signing of the Paris Agreement rulebook. In addition, nations also made commitments to curb greenhouse gas emissions, align the finance sector with net zero by 2020, halt and reverse forest loss, as well as end international financing for fossil fuels, amongst others. Key outstanding issues that still need to be resolved relate to the building adaptation to the inevitable impacts of climate change, that is heat waves, floods and storms, and loss and damage, along with necessary financial support, especially in developing countries. Nigeria recently updated and submitted the nationally determined contributions to the United Nations Climate Change Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, as part of her commitment to the global target of keeping the Earth's warming below 2 degrees Celsius in line with Article 4.2 of the Paris Agreement. In the updated NDC, Nigeria recommits its unconditional contribution of 20% below business as usual by 2030 and increases its conditional contribution from 45% to 75% below business as usual by 2030, provided that sufficient international support is forthcoming. Ultimately leading to the UN Climate Change Conference 2022 in Egypt's Sharm el-Sheikh, it's important for African leaders to secure a pragmatic path to net zero by creating an agenda that addresses the peculiar nature of Nigeria's economy. Thus, this pre-summit will engage relevant stakeholders to deliberate on the impact of the current macroeconomic environment in Nigeria, addressing energy transition as a path to net zero in Nigeria, and deliberate on the importance of the blue economy to achieving net zero. Just to add my own bit to this, I think it's also important for this conference to think about how we can legitimately track our commitments as well, because ability to measure, evaluate, track, and quantify will also ensure that the international community has confidence that we can meet our end of the bargain when international funds come in. We also have to partner across sectors, including the agriculture and food landscape, because this is a big contributor to climate change, but also highly affected by climate change. And with the current food crisis in our country, the climate agenda is directly linked to the food agenda. Once again, I extend our profound appreciation to every participant here for accepting our invitation to share our knowledge, experience, and insights on roadmap to Nigeria's COP at this event in the national interest. Finally, I urge you once again to register for the 28th Nigerian Economic Summit Group through the NESG website to join other experts and stakeholders in articulating an agenda for Nigeria with clear priorities for shared prosperity in 2023 and beyond. God bless you all, and may God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you, and once again, welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Ndidi, for the welcome address. Clearly put, clearly stated, and thank you for guiding us through. And I hope everyone is getting ready to register for the next NESG, the Nigerian Economic Summit, so that we can be able to discuss and guide ourselves through how to achieve the next day. Thank you again, Ndidi Iwuneli, for that leadership and strong support. Next, we've got a quick message from the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Transportation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Magdalene Ajani. Hello, Dr. Ajani. How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you so much. It's good to have you here, and it's good to have you join us. So you've got the floor now.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. I want to begin by thanking the organizers for inviting me to this meeting. Please just give me a minute. Yeah, I thank you all for inviting me to this meeting. And all the distinguished delegates from all walks of life who are here to dialogue on the means and ways to mitigate the impacts of climate change in our nation in this 28th Nigerian Economic Summit Group with the theme Road to Nigerian's Co-op, a pragmatic path to net zero using the green economy, blue economy, and forestry. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in April 2022, a report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, stated that the African continent contributed about 4% of greenhouse gas emissions, which is huge indeed. And it also documented the rapid acceleration of global warming, underscoring the imperative for all nations to take drastic action for the world to reach net zero emissions by 2050. It was at the COP26 in Glasgow, UK, that President Muhammadu Buhari stated that Nigeria's commitment to cut its carbon emission to net zero is 2060. In his address, he outlined Nigeria's energy transition plan, which will involve the increased use of liquefied natural gas and subsequently renewable energy. As you are aware, in line with its energy transition plan, Nigeria committed to reducing its greenhouse gas emission by 20% unconditionally and 45% with true external support. To this end, the country has now developed a sectoral action plan for the implementation of the nationally determined contributions with focus on energy, oil and gas, agriculture and land use, power, and transportation. It is expected that all ministries, departments, and agencies, public and private industries and organizations will align their individual plans to this. The challenges mitigating against emission reduction and transition to renewable energy in Nigeria are mirrored, ranging from energy access and energy poverty issues, development of infrastructure, financing, and investment gaps. Therefore, we will experience a slow takeoff in transitioning. However, it becomes imperative to utilize the resources, time, and opportunity to ensure setting up of right strategies and be on track to meet our NDC goals. One of the ways to achieve leveraging the green economy, blue economy, and forestry involves shifting to a circular economy that promotes sustainable economic development backed by government policies, action plans, and implementable strategies. It will also involve setting up transportation, construction, and energy infrastructure that can sustain pre- and post-transitioning phases of achieving net zero era. Also of importance will be access to innovations in energy alternatives, investments, and funding of sustainable agriculture, development of our marine endowments, and improvements on forest reserves and fight desertification. Unfortunately, achieving net zero will be a disruptive process for Nigeria with social, economic, and political implications. I believe the massive financing involved, shifting to a circular economy, development of new infrastructure, modification of existing infrastructure, synergy between multiple sectors, developing the grassroots areas to align with the transition, and many more will require all of us to develop a sustainable people-centered plan and prioritize funding. The transportation sector is one of the areas being focused on in the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan, ETP. The vision behind Nigeria's transport policy is to provide fast, safe, efficient, affordable, integrated, and environmentally friendly transport system that will drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector. To this end, the transportation sector has undertaken the following. One, we are developing transport policies to regulate this and issues in the sector. We're also creating links between the different modes to reduce overdependence on roads, talking about promoting intermodalism of transportation. The search for development of technological capacities around clean technologies such as zero emission vehicles is one of the things we are looking into. To this end, the 17th edition of the National Council on Transportation's theme is Transportation Technology and Innovation for Social Economic Sustainability. The ministry is encouraging all states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory to bring and exhibit green and other innovations to the 5-day events. We shall be giving visibility and support to such innovations. We are also looking at enforcement of compliance with International Maritime Organization regulations and the IMO 2020 sulfur cap through the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency. And we are working on a road transport transformation program, which will sanitize road transport and mass transit operations with a view to building a private sector driven and organized mass transit systems in the country, among other benefits. I'm optimistic that the team of experts and participants assembled here today for this summit will come up with precise and actionable roadmap for achieving a path to net zero using green economy, blue economy, and forestry. I wish us all a fruitful deliberation. Thank you, and God bless us all.
Thank you very much, Madam Permanent Secretary. We really appreciate your, your insight and your welcome speech. Your goodwill speech. If you all agree with me, transportation is a key sector in the scale of net zero in Nigeria. Lagos alone, you can account for the number of vehicles, and other forms of transportation that is currently, that Nigeria is currently, leveraging on. We look forward to, favorable policies and conducive working environment for adopting new methods of transportation in Nigeria. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajani, for that session. So now we're moving over to the discussion part. And for this discussion part, we'll be having a conversation around Nigeria's net zero objectives using green economy, blue economy, and forestry. Not to overflog all the conversations that have been said so far. You heard the wonderful presentation from Dr. Magdalene Ajani, who is the Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Transportation, highlighting all the different points of what the Transportation Ministry is doing to assist Nigeria in achieving the net zero target. And also you heard from NESG board member, Ndidi Iwuneli, who shared also insights around how Nigeria should be focused, within the COP27 program, and as well achieve, towards the net zero target. So to help us carry on this conversation, I've got 4 people, wonderful people, good at their professional jobs, and also contributing immensely to the different sectors where they are. In no particular order, permit me to start, to welcome our guests. First, I'll start with Professor Aliu Joro. Professor Aliu Joro is currently the Director General of the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Agency, NESRA. NESRA is the agency who leads and mandates the Extended Producer's Responsibility Framework. For those in the circularity sector, you know how this has become a driving force on how this, the Nigerian circular economy has been scaling and growing over the recent years. Prior to his appointment, Professor Joro was the Deputy Director and Head of Research at the National Center for Petroleum Research and Development at the Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University, Bauchi. Welcome, Professor Joro. It is good to have you. Next on our list is Professor Chukwumerije Okereke. Professor Okereke is the Director and Professor at the Center of Climate Change and Development at the Alex Ekweme Federal University, Ebonyi State. Previously, he was a professor of environment and development at the University of Reading, where he also serves as the co-director of Climate and Justice Center at the Leverhulme, I hope I got that right, Leverhulme Climate Justice Doctoral Scholarship Program. Welcome, Professor Okereke. You tell us about your role at the scholarship program. And we have also Dr. Anthony Inyong, who was recently appointed the Regional Director of Global Center of Adaptation, Africa, on secondment from his position as the Director of Climate Change and Green Growth Department of the African Development Bank, that's AFDB, Climate Change Department. And so Professor Inyong has over 30 years of experience in environmental and natural resource management, renewable energy, and green growth. Welcome, Dr. Inyong. And then I have, last but not the least, Mr. Adekola Oyenuga, who is the founder and CEO of AO Blue Economy and Energy Consulting. He specializes in providing, strategic advisory, management support services to the global, corporate world, particularly within the oil and gas communities, electric and power, shipping and maritime industries. He also has provided strategic advice to the UN Global Compact and other global organizations. Gentlemen, welcome. Again, let me make that apology. We have an all-man panel. I'm sure next year, when I'm being called again, the NESG will make sure they have, a well-balanced panel. So, welcome, gentlemen. Good to have you here. As you heard in the last 2 speakers, you've heard how the outline towards COP27 is going to look like in Nigeria. What's our plan? What's our strategy? I mean, we've got another global event that we're going to pitch Nigeria as a business. Permit me if I use my startup investment and ecosystem investment terminology, because again, this is about economy. We're going to pitch the Nigerian green economy, which the vice president has started doing the pitching a couple of weeks back. Now, what's our plan? How do we achieve this net zero? Looking at some of the critical points around economic development, policies, and also opening up a whole lot of opportunities around what is existing in our, in our dynamic economy. And you will agree with me, Nigeria has got a very dynamic economy. And many times often, we have to develop solutions that portray the dynamism of our economy. So I'll go first with Prof Jaro. So the net zero is a very big thing across the world right now. We know that NESG has been contributing to Nigeria's net zero objective through the promotion of sustainable utilization of Nigeria's natural resources, and also looking at the different frameworks that you have created. Now, help us understand from your work how some of these frameworks have also helped Nigeria to achieve what we need to achieve around the net zero, and how do we see growth in this achievement?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bankole, the anchor of this program, and I wish to thank the Nigerian Economic Summit Group for inviting me to be a panelist. So, in the area of circular economy, I can say, NESG as an agency, we have the mandate to ensure that we implement the extended producer responsibility. The EPR is part of our regulations. So currently we have 35 environmental regulations cutting across both the green and the brown environment. So about 9 of the regulations has provision for the extended producer responsibility. So the EPR framework has a provision that whoever generates a waste should take care of it. So right from the beginning, there is need for all these industries that involve in this production process to set aside certain amount for taking care of any item when it comes to its end of life. So already we have adopted the industry form of model in Nigeria. So they have already formed some PROs in some sectors. One of the sectors includes the food and beverages sector with PRO that is called Food and Beverages Recycling Alliance. We also have the one on battery waste, which is called Alliance for Responsible Battery Recycling. And we also have the third one on EOS, which is EOS Producer Organization of Nigeria. So the essence of this EPR is to achieve a circular economy so that all waste generated will be taken back as a raw material. Well, we know that it's not possible to have everything 100%, but all the same, the bulk part of that waste will be taken back into the system. So this is one of the key ways to achieve sustainability, sustainable utilization of our natural resources through such a process. We can only achieve net zero if we imbibe sustainable means of managing our resources, because we all know that some of these resources are not renewable. They tend to get depleted. And also in this process, we encourage reuse instead of even recycling, because recycling also entails the use of other resources, especially energy is involved. And we know that some of these resources are not renewable. So only renewable ones can be used without getting depleted if we use them in a very good way. And likewise, if we continue to just use some of these our natural resources, like those that are coming from the forest, we are going to destroy the ecosystem. They are going to be depleted. So we should do that in a sustainable manner, the way we can allow them to regenerate And we must manage our wastes responsibly, especially the domestic wastes we generate should either be recycled or they can be used for other uses. For example, energy generation. If we combine all this together, I believe we would be able to achieve this net zero. This is one side of it. So coming to some of our regulations, especially those to do with the brown environment, we have a lot of provisions there. We issue what we call permits. We monitor what some of these industries emit. There are specific guidelines and limits for these emissions. So we do that to ensure that they don't exceed some of these limits. And recently we review our permitting scoring guidelines to include the type of energy use, how do you use renewable form of energy and other things. And likewise, we carry out the environmental auditing of this entire processes taking place in some of these facilities to ensure that they're environmentally friendly. Likewise, we also have some programs in the pipeline that are tailored towards reducing emission. One of
So picking up from what Dr. Jaro has shared around the EPR, I believe that there are quite a number of conversations currently going on in different production communities or manufacturing communities on how EPR has become a strong tool or a strong framework for production responsibility. So let me take this conversation next to Professor Okereke. So Prof, I know that you have also been involved with crafting out the right strategy for Nigeria around the low emission development strategy. Can you just help us throw a light on what all this is all about, right? How does this differ from the existing, energy transition plan?
Thank you very much. Yes, you're right. I am leading the team, which we call the Deep Decarbonization Project Pathway. And the team is responsible for the modeling that will feed into the production of the long-term low emission development strategy for Nigeria. One way to help our panelists and our listeners to understand is that before you really make any announcement for long-term emission development emissions reduction, you need to really know how much of emissions you're generating from all the key sectors in great detail. We call this the energy balance. And then you need to come up with scenarios on how you're going to reduce the emissions from all of those sectors. I like also what Dr. Ajani said, that it is not just about the technical feasibility. Then you also have to understand the economic, the social, and the political and institutional repercussions of the different emission reduction trajectories that you're proposing. The challenge with what we have in Nigeria today is that there are so many pronouncements, but they are not backed by quantitative modeling, what we call integrated assessment modeling, to really, first of all, come with a clear understanding of the energy balance, and then follow up with quantitative analysis and scenarios that can offer practical quantitative solutions and options for emission reductions. So the long-term emission strategy, which is being developed, will complement the ETP. The ETP is actually essentially an energy transition plan. I still am struggling to understand why Nigeria would hang a net zero emission on an energy transition plan, for me, it doesn't make sense, because the non-energy sector accounts for a significant share of our emissions. So how can you achieve a net zero only through energy? So what happens to AFOLU? The emissions from agriculture, from forestry and land use. You would have heard Ndidi Nwuneli speaking quite eloquently and accurately about the significant impact of climate change in the agricultural sector. But Nigeria is one of the highest emitters in this area. So the ETP, of course, is a very strong document in the area of energy transition, but it doesn't, in my view, offer the document that Nigeria should base its really net zero work on, because, as I already indicated, it doesn't accommodate or cover the AFOLU sector. And so the LTS, which we are developing, will hopefully fill that gap by looking not just on the other key energy sectors like transport, like oil and gas, industry, building, but also look at the AFOLU sector. One other important point is that we know that McKinsey is a very respectable organization, and their work is often quite reliable, as you can see with the ETP. But Nigerians do not have access to the data with which the ETP plan has been produced. And I think this is a massive and significant weakness. In other climes, the modeling and the data that goes into the modeling is actually quite public. If I give you some website now, you can actually go and check out the emission inventory of the United Kingdom. And as emissions change from year to year, this inventory is updated. And we spend quite a lot of time debating, discussing, quarreling over some of the numbers. And that gives a lot of confidence and credibility to whatever plan that you're producing, because now you know exactly the numbers that are coming from the AFOLU, from the transport, from the industry, from the building. You can track how these numbers are changing and the impact of the various policies on it. And so another big thing that you're going to see over the next year as we round up the LTS and the deep decarbonization project, which I am leading on, is that we will make publicly available all the numbers that we have used, all the assumptions, the heat days, the cooling days, the number of penetration of, the essence of penetration of cars to rural areas, the rural urban migration, the GDP ratio, and all of these things will be made known, because you cannot calculate the country's energy balance or have a meaningful transition that can be measured without this making explicit these assumptions. And finally, before I yield, I also want to make the point that we need to understand the seriousness of this, of what we're talking about here. Some people kind of join the bandwagon and think this is kind of popular, and unless we can come and just say a few words and maybe go to COP and sound nice. We are talking about a phenomenon that is projected to cost Nigeria $460 billion by 2060. And according to the statistics by the FCDO, former DFID, climate change is already costing us $100 billion as we speak. We have about 22 countries that have already said that they will not use fossil fuel in their jurisdiction by 2040. And as you were saying in your introduction, oil accounts for 86% of our export and about 90% or so of our revenue. Despite the what has happened in Ukraine, which has kind of provided another big lease for use of oil, all the available models show that there's going to be a significant decrease in oil usage as climate policy bites. And so the question is, what are we going to do if we are not thinking seriously about the impact of climate change and about this green transition? And so I will urge my fellow Nigerians to really understand that these are not business as usual, kind of times. apart from these proliferation of policies, we need to get into business and really come up with concrete policies and plan to enable the transition to take place. Otherwise, we're going to be doomed.
Thank you very much, Prof. That was quite challenging, and that was also quite intriguing. I took out a few points about what the cost, what is this, likely going to cost us, increase CO2 emissions in Nigeria. As we all are aware, Nigeria is currently becoming much more productive, in terms of manufacturing and coal. So there's bound to be this rise. But while we're working at it, since we know this rise will happen, what do we need to do currently now to make sure that we're able to mitigate them? And thank you, Prof, for that very insightful contribution. So next, I will jump to Mr. Adekola Oyenuga from AO Consulting. And Mr. Oyenuga, I mean, you've been around the Nordics and the Scandinavians for a while. You're running a couple of consulting companies around oil and also, environmental standards and the blue economy, which is very important to me. Nigeria has got a fantastic stretch when it comes to coastlines and shorelines. We know that the shorelines, the coastlines have been a source of livelihood to quite a number of, communities and also state economies, and even Nigeria as a whole. Now, what is our focus? What do you think going forward for Nigeria to be able to achieve the net zero, and with our interest in scaling the blue economy? What do you think we can do? Or what do you think should be the types of net zero objectives that Nigeria should set in place to say that while we are building and scaling a blue economy, what do we need to mitigate and how do we need to do that? Okay, please, can you unmute Mr. Adekola, please? Thank you. Over to you.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And it's a pleasure to be able to join this esteemed panel today on such a momentous topic as climate change and the implications to Nigeria, as well as defining a pragmatic way to the Nigerian COP in Sharm el-Sheikh. The first thing, of course, that we have to talk about before we begin to talk about, okay, so what do we need to do in order to put Nigeria on a path towards net zero, utilizing the benefits of the blue economy in Nigeria? Is, first of all, let's have a definition of what is the blue economy. A number of us are probably aware of it, but I'll just go through it. So the blue economy essentially refers to the sustainable use of the ocean resources or water resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods and jobs, while preserving the health of the ocean ecosystem. So it is kind of like an analogy of when you talk about the green economy for the land-based economic activity. And when you transfer that same concept to the sea space or water spaces, then we begin to talk about the blue economy. And the blue economy, for ease of navigating it, because the seas are very wide, the oceans are very wide, we can look at it as being made of, in terms of economic activities, we can talk about fisheries and aquaculture, we can talk about transportation, shipping, port activities, we can talk about mariculture, that is developing ocean resources for input to industrial processes. There is the transport and hospitality side. There is the oil and gas and the energy aspect, and then there is biodiversity and ecosystem services. So this is very broad and the potential is quite huge. Now coming to the specific case of Nigeria, so what can we do to take advantage of the blue economy on the journey to net zero? What I must say, taking a step back, because before I came on this panel, I took a look at some background documents which have been prepared by the Nigerian Ministry of Environment, right, the Climate Department. And there, of course, is the document on the nationally determined contributions, which was updated in November last year. I think that's an excellent document. And this has been backed up by the long-term low emission development strategy, the LTV 2050, right? This is an excellent document. And essentially what has been defined in that document, that is, if I start with the nationally determined contribution document, is that there is an ambition to reduce Nigeria's greenhouse gas emissions based on a 2018 baseline by 20% unconditionally by 2030, and then unconditionally, conditioned on the availability of external support, to reduce it by up to 47%, right, by 2030. Now that's excellent. And then of course you have the long-term strategy, which says that there is an ambition by the year 2050 to cut greenhouse gases down by 50%, in half by 2050. And then by that time to place Nigeria on a path. Now I noted that, and that was very good. So it does not say that by 2050, we're supposed to be at net zero, but by 2050, Nigeria is supposed to be on a path towards having net zero emissions across sectors, right? Also with a gender perspective put to it. So these are excellent starting points. What I can just say say from there is that now the document now breaks down the vision and the NDCs based on sectors. So what is going to be done by different sectors? And we can see that the sectors that it prioritizes, of course, energy, you have, which is the greatest emitter of greenhouse gases, which includes oil and gas, transport, electricity generation, residential and industrial energy use. Then you have agriculture, forestry, and other uses, waste, and then industrial processes. Now, the first thing I'm going to say about those documents, excellent as they are, is that they do not make any explicit reference to the blue economy, right? Somewhere along the line on some page, inside, I see just a reference to fisheries. Okay, fisheries, but nothing else. So where does the blue economy come in? So the first problem we need to solve is what is called sea blindness, right? We have the sea all around us. We have ocean resources all around us, but we have not learned to appreciate the economic potential in the ocean and water resources around us. So that's the first thing that we should know. So that's the first thing. We have to get over that sea blindness and see that the sea is more than just somewhere where we walk on or we, basically do whatever we do, but it can be a significant provider of economic activity, and it can be a significant tool in taking us along the path towards net zero. Then, if I could go a little bit, deep dive a little bit more. Now, the documents which are already there, which is talking about the NDC document as well as the long-term strategy, it identifies the key sectors which are the key polluters, they were emitters in Nigeria. For example, we have the energy sector, which accounts for 60% based on 2018 numbers of greenhouse gas emissions. And the energy sector is broken down into oil and gas, which is accounts for 36%. You have transport, electricity generation, residential energy production, which accounts for 24%. You have aquaculture, forestry, and other land use. Now, what you will have to see is that the blue economy is a cross-cutting sector. Of course, an excellent thing about the long-term strategies is also says how to deliver on the planned reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, so to deliver on the targets. Now, so we have, if we were to say, let's focus on the energy sector now, electricity, or let's say the energy sector significantly, you have oil and gas. From oil and gas, there is a significant offshore component. So the offshore component naturally comes into the blue economy. So the blue economy, in this sense, if we were to use that lens to apply it to the greenhouse gas, reducing greenhouse gases, mitigation, adaptation, and diversification, we would look at it that basically offshore production of oil and gas can be used in a way, rather than flaring the gas, this is just an example, it can be reinjected for enhanced oil recovery, for example. You also have other potentials. Rather than burning fossil fuels, we can begin to develop, for example, offshore wind. Other examples are, what about the exploitation of our hydro resources on land? So there are several ways that we can look at, that we can, within the spaces of the sectors that have already been identified, we can see those areas that overlap with the aquatic spaces, and we should develop a competent approach to how to exploit this in order to take advantage of the benefits to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. So that was just an example. Of course, we can go much further. But at this point, right, Mr. Moderator, I think perhaps I can take it a bit easy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oyenuga. I think that was deeply introspective, and this is what I found out. I think that from your conversation, you made us understand that with all the different, strategies and plans that has been made towards the net zero in Nigeria, very little attempt or attention has been given to the blue economy, which I think I quite agree with you, because at the NCIC, Nigeria Climate Innovation, water, blue economy has seemed to be one of the most difficult aspects of finding scaling or innovation type of frameworks that can help to build against mitigating climate change effects around the ocean, not just for wash and sanitation, meaning that water and sanitation, but I mean the blue economy itself. And we're hoping that in the nearby future we can build more inclusive blue economy strategies for cities like Lagos or states like Lagos, Rivers, and all the different coastal states in Nigeria. And I'm sure your help will be needed when that time comes. So thank you very much, Mr. Oyenuga. So let me jump back to you, Prof. Prof, you've said a lot, but can you tell us in a minute or two, what do you think our plan should be for COP27? Prof. Okerekesa, this is for you. Is Prof there? While we wait for Prof. Okay, yes, Prof is yes. Prof, please. What do you think our plan should be for COP27?
Okay, so I'm not able to unmute. I don't understand why the host should be muting and unmuting. Yeah, but I can't turn on my video. But anyway, the plan, look, the plan should not be for COP27. We shouldn't be making plans for COPs. We should be making plans for how we can translate the excellent documents that Ade, Kola, myself, and many others have spoken about and contributed in writing into practical plans and strategies and policies. And when you have made such a translation, you can then begin to think whether there is somebody that is coming to COP or another organization coming to COP with whom you can discuss your plan. I have already indicated some of the weaknesses in the ETP. Yet, what the ETP has done and what Vice President Oshibanjo has done is actually the best way to proceed in matters like this. You sit down, you write a plan, you cost the plan, you launch the plan, and then you look for people that can help you to translate the plan into action. So leave aside the fact that I don't think that, well, I think that they should have made their data more available, or that Afolu is missing, or that this plan was not written by Nigerians, or that we are not, there was not wide consultation. It is still the best, or one of the best in this space. The NDC is also a very rigorous and thorough document, like Adekola has told us, and I agree. But what are the specific plans to, for example, ensure that we stop flaring gas? The first ETP, the first NDC says we will stop flaring gas by 2030. The second NDC repeated it. As we speak now, what negotiations are going on to ensure that this happens? What are the financial and infrastructural challenges? What are the details? It's not clear to me. Take transport. The ETP says that they will, we will have to see a decrease of 97% of emissions in our transport sector due to about 80% uptake of electric vehicles by 2050 in order for the net zero to work. Okay, if I want to have a situation of 80% uptake in electric vehicles, what must I do now to ensure that that happens? So these are the levels of details that we need to be discussing. Otherwise, we're just making pronouncements with no intention to keeping it.
Thank you very much, Prof. But again, I'm sure you agree with me that we're all going to COP27 with a strategy, with a group, because we have a couple of documents that we are working on. So what should be our approach during this conversation? What sort of partners should we look like? For what angle of conversation should we be talking like? Like you said, the vice president, has taken, some proactive effort to go on an investment sourcing drive, to speak to possible partners, possible investors on how we can finance our ETP, that's the Energy Transition Plan. And I'm sure that for global events such as, the UNFCCC COPs, you have a mixture of everyone in there. So for the group going from Nigeria, you and I, for me at the NCIC, I know what I'm going to go and look for. It is green finance, green investments, and all that has to do with the different sectors. But there are other players going around there. So let me jump this to you, Mr. Oyenuga. What do you think from your own perspective? And I really would like to hear what sort of approach we should be looking at from the blue economy perspective, because we're really interested in the blue economy and all the immense opportunities it could bring from. So please help us understand from your perspective. We're going for this event. Yes, Prof has helped us understand that our strategy should not be this event, but beyond it on a more grand scale. But this event is just right beside us, and we're likely going to see everyone else there that we need to speak with.
Yes, Bankole, you're going for green finance. You can only get it if you have a clear plan to get the finance. Yes. And that plan is an investment plan. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we cannot. We need to put our house in order. Then our strategy at COP will succeed. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Noted, sir. So, Mr. Eniga, what do you have to say
yes,
about
please. Thank you. So in terms of, you're asking me about what should be the strategy for the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh for Nigeria on the blue economy, right? Yes. The first thing is, like Professor Okereke rightly mentioned, we should not be planning for isolated events. We have to think in a long-term perspective. And I think the Ministry of the Environment has taken a very good first step by coming out with these excellent documents on the NDC as well as the long-term strategy plan, even though it does not provide enough depth on the blue economy. And I also believe that the energy transition plan, which is being championed by the Vice President's office, is also a good start, right? You need to have something out there. And then, of course, there will be several iterations. Now, the quality of these documents, even though they are not perfect, as I've said, the quality and the amount of work that has gone into them, the amount of stakeholder consultation, I believe is a signal to the people out there who want to engage with Nigeria as the largest country in Africa, probably the third largest market in the world by 2050, is a signal of seriousness. And the fact that it's being championed at the level of the Vice President, so that there is political will behind it. My advice, if I could specifically talk about the blue economy, and I think there's still a little bit of time to do a few things, is we have the key documents, we don't have to change them, but we can deep dive in order to be clearer. We've talked that there's a lot of talk about when you talk about the sectors which are focused on for energy or for the greenhouse gas policies within the strategy documents. You talk about energy, you talk about aquaculture, but you do not create a space for the blue economy. What I would have loved to see in an updated version, for example, of the NDC document would be the energy sector analysis, which is excellent. But if you look into it, you can isolate elements that are relevant to the blue economy. I take as an example, oil and gas, the energy sector is responsible, based on 2018 numbers, for 60% of Nigeria's greenhouse gas emissions, right? Within that, you have the oil and gas, which is responsible for 36%. Then when you talk about delivering on the NDC targets, there is a deep dive on the energy sector, which talks about, okay, what can we do within oil and gas production? And you talk about basically reducing gas flaring and so on. Within gas flaring or the oil and gas, you can talk about onshore and offshore. Now, the offshore space is overlapping with the blue economy. So there should be a way to disaggregate, I know it might be a bit troublesome, disaggregate all the elements that relate to blue spaces. And you find it within the energy aspect, energy area, oil and gas. You find it within transport. For example, Nigeria's transport policy. What has been said about inland water transport? What has been said about the ports? What has been said? So basically you have that value chain which has to do with the blue spaces. Now that has to be disaggregated and treated as its own area, because that's the nature of the blue economy. And then you apply the same treatment, of course, when you come to agriculture, forestry, and other land use. There's just, as I said earlier, there's just a brief mention of fisheries. But we want to talk about aquaculture. Aquaculture has a significant potential, both in terms of boosting economic activity, providing employment, reducing poverty. So it needs to be treated as its own item. So I believe all these things need to be isolated and treated as a blue economy area. And then we can see it in itself. And that process should run right up to the financing, because you're beginning to have, there was a talk about the financing, we talked about the green bonds, we talked about the green financing systems, but there are also mechanisms being developed for blue bonds and blue financing systems. So we need to begin to see the blue economy as an area of focus, which is worth focusing on in itself. And that's extremely important. So perhaps this might go to also be quite relevant to the Ministry of Transport also, because it's also something that is relevant to their portfolio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oyenuga. Thank you very much, Prof. Okereke, for that steering and that right direction. From this other last phase, or this phase of conversation, it is clear that our focus should not be on COP27, but largely putting our house in order and putting a very good strategy for us to have a better product to sell, which is the Nigerian economy. I have the Permanent Secretary of Transportation here, and I was waiting for her to be interested in responding to a few things, because Ministry of Transportation has been called out a couple of times. And thank you, ma'am, for taking that initiative. So please, Dr. Ajani, share your contribution.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the panelists for all their contributions. I have listened very carefully to the suggestions and the contributions of all of you. But apparently, there are still a lot of information that you probably do not know about. But just to point out that there is a committee on expanded blue economy, looking at how best to harness our blue economy. And this is chaired by the Vice President himself. and the Minister of Transportation is the co-chair. And in this committee, we do have all the relevant MDAs, including the littoral states. And as we speak, we are working on the detailed plan, having formed thematic working groups and looking at the cost implications on things we need to do to harness the imports of the blue economy. So this is ongoing as we speak. The transport policy is already before the Federal Executive Committee, and we pray that very soon, before the year runs out, this will be a working document. We also have already prepared a document on maritime policy, which is going to give more details to whatever it is we have encapsulated in the national transport policy. So we'll be glad to work with so many people to have clear working documents for the nation and see how best to harness our blue economy. There's so much we can do there in terms of creating wealth and also reducing the greenhouse emission. NEMANSA is very on top of its program on the IMO 2020 sulfur program, and we are not at all playing with it. And we are also working on a mass transit scheme, which is going to be focusing more on alternative energy in terms of electric vehicles. Some of us just tend to keep quiet and work till we get to the point where we can unveil what is going on. But just to let us know that Ministry of Transportation is really working on improving the blue economy and also reducing the the gas emissions. So we're on it, and we need everybody to work with us. We will accept all the suggestions that will push us forward. And I'm glad I attended this meeting, so I have people that I can reach out to help us achieve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Magdalene Ajani. I think it is safe to say that with Mr. Adekola Oyenuga here and myself, who are really interested in the blue economy, we will definitely reach out on on how to collaborate and how to support more in Nigeria's drive to be able to achieve its blue economy strategies. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Prof, in 1 minute, Prof Okereke now, in 1 minute, can you give us a quick closing line, still focused on how we can scale what we have done so far? And then over to you also, Mr. Eniga. One minute so that we can go to the breakout.
Sure. I'm very sorry. I usually like to be very positive, but I'm very sorry if I sounded a bit negative in this meeting. But I'm frustrated that we have so many great plans, and then we write another plan, another plan, another plan, another policy. But we are very, very, very slow in implementation. Let us not forget, this is 2022. We still have less than 1 gigawatt of installed renewable energy in Nigeria. Less than 1. We are still producing just about installed 13 gigawatts. We got our independence in 1960, for Christ's sake, crying aloud. And we have Indonesia, 71 installed gigawatt. South Africa, about 41 installed gigawatt. We are hovering at 13 gigawatt, out of which only 4 gigawatt is producing. We cannot write our plan out of this mess. We need to tighten up our belt, guard up our loins, and be focused on translating these great plans into practical actions.
Thank you very much, Prof. I like your passion. Every time you and I talk, you always try to let me know what is going on, what is new. I hope we're not saying the same thing we were saying in the last time. And I really appreciate, your area of perspective. We know it could be a bit frustrating, but again, we're taking little steps as fast as we can go. These are part of the dynamism that I said that we have. So we have to really work within the context of that dynamism. Mr. Enuga, what do you think? In 1 minute, how do you think we should proceed from where we are?
Well, I'd like to say it's extremely comforting and encouraging to hear Dr. Ajani's input about what the work that's already being done at a very high level on the blue economy and the extent of stakeholder consultation that is going in. So I think that's very good. But of course, we also have to point to the fact that Nigeria has a reputation of being the country with the highest amount of excellent reports, which are yet to be translated into concrete changes on the ground. So beyond the reports, we also should be looking at the systems of delivery, right? And that is the unique thing about the blue economy, just to focus on that. It touches every sphere of the economy, right from the grassroots up to the very top. So we have to focus on the channels of delivery so as to make sure that we can actually deliver or convert these excellent plans on paper into things that actually make lives better for the general populace. That was it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Oyenoga. To just do a quick recap of what we've been having so far, right from the welcome speeches and the keynote addresses. We know that our strategy, to summarize it, is not short term but quite long term. We also know that quite a couple of policies have been made to help us, to see Nigeria reduce and also manage, its emission levels. We also know that there's a long-term emission, strategy for the Nigerian economy. We know that there's an energy transmission, which is not so perfect, but for now it's a working document towards the growth of an emerging, energy economy in Nigeria. Also, blue economy somehow took up the whole conversation at the later part of this conversation. And we saw how Ministry of Transportation also have shared a few information and insight on the different committees and, platforms that have been created to drive for, for stronger frameworks around achieving the net zero. In a couple of minutes, particularly in 1 minute, we'll be jumping over to our breakout rooms. And these breakout sessions, we have 2 breakout sessions currently that has been set up. Our breakout sessions are being coordinated by 2 wonderful people. So we have a breakout session on marine ecosystem and blue economy that is led by Chiamaka Mogo. Chiamaka Mogo is the Executive Secretary of Africa Marine Environment Sustainability Initiative, AFMESI. I hope sounds like Have Mercy. Okay, AFMESI, and a member of the Marine Ecosystem and Blue Economy Thematic Group at the NESG. Ms. Mogo has been working towards, developing more inclusive societies, and she's very impassioned about her work with a master's degrees in public policy and global affairs from the University of British Columbia in Canada. And also we have another breakout session on energy transition and circular economy that is being led by none other than my friend, who is the prolific Dr. Eugene Itua. Dr. Itua has that wide experience and knowledge in developing strong, policy framework strategy for macroeconomic, gaps and solutions. And he is leading the low carbon development strategy, with sustainable green financing. And also he's a thematic lead for circular economy and sustainability in the NESG. I mean, if I begin to reel out what Dr. Itua has done for this country, these are the hands at the background who are making things work, for the Nigerian economy. So in a couple of seconds, we will be converging into that line, and we have unassigned rooms, right? So please, you can join different rooms for these breakout sessions. There's still quite a number of people that have not joined different rooms. And so we are about to begin the breakout sessions. Please kindly join the rooms that you are interested in, so that we can have a fantastic conversation. Thank you very much for a beautiful session, and I hope that we'll all converge back in a couple of minutes. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bankole, for excellent moderation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. ended. So I think the room can be closed now so that we can have everybody back on this stage. Thank you. Can the NESG team please close the other rooms so we can close out? Okay, well, I will give it a few more minutes. I think the numbers are okay. Everyone is coming back. All right, thank you. So while we wait for everyone here, I'm sure that our number will have, depleted a little bit, but nevertheless, that is good. I think it was good conversation so far. In a couple of minutes, we will allow the session coordinators to give a summary of the breakout sessions. And then afterwards, we'll have Q&A. Now, the Q&A, because of time, we have to be, very fast about it. So we expect your questions to be shared either on the chat group, so that we can curate these questions and direct them, to the different individuals who can answer these questions. With that being said, ladies first, Chiamaka. Hi.
Thank you so much. Hello,
Great.
everyone.
So I'm sure you had a very good conversation at the marine, the marine ecosystem breakout session. So help us out. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. What's the summary looking like?
Okay. I think we can use maybe 5 minutes.
All right. Fantastic. Over to
Thank you. All right. So for our session, we were talking about the blue economy and net zero. How do we achieve net zero through Nigeria's blue economy sector? I was very happy to represent the lead of the marine ecosystems thematic group of NESG. And so we considered 2 questions. The first question being, how do we transition to sustainable shipping practices for the Nigerian blue economy sector? And the second question was the role of the private sector in helping Nigeria to achieve net zero through the blue economy sector. So I'll just start with some of the conversations we had under question 1, which was really about how do we make shipping sustainable in Nigeria? And we were touching on government interventions. There were contributions in terms of the fact that Nigeria needs to have more stringent regulations on the kind of fuel that's used to transport ships within our coast. For example, IMO has a 0.5 sulfur cap content, which coastal states, flag states, and port states have the authority to implement. So Nigeria has the authority to say, well, if you're going to be doing shipping in our coast, your fuel content has to be at 0.5, which is the IMO cap, in order to ensure low carbon emissions. So we're talking about the fact that we need to be stringent about that. We also talked about the fact that while some ships might transition to renewable energy instead of fossil fuels, but what happens when they get to our ports? Are ports environment friendly? Do we have, for example, charging facilities for electric run ships, for example? So our ports also need to be green. We also talked about reception facilities. Do our ports have adequate reception facilities for waste from ships? And the conversation we had was that we do, because we have, Nigeria also has contracted, the Nigerian Ports Authority has contracted its port reception facilities to a private company as well. So when ships come into our shores, there are port waste reception facilities to receive waste from ships. We talked about the fact that being that we are a port state and we're also a flag state, we should ensure that the requirements of our port state control activities also include the fact that ships should have recycling facilities on board. So not just the waste they bring when they come to our ports to deposit them in our waste reception facilities. On board their facilities, they should have recycling that sorts out their waste. So this can be included as part of our requirements as a port state control nation. We also talked about wreck recycling and how typically our African countries and African waters are really used as a dump for shipwrecks. So we need to have a broader strategy to ensure that, to mitigate against the dumping of wrecks on our waters. And we know that wrecks also lead to pollution. So we also should have a strategy for quick response in the situations where there are wrecks. Then we also talked about another important fact, which is the fact that Nigeria does not have a national mangrove restoration project. In the Niger Delta, for example, oil spills are very, very common. And we've seen the effects of oil spills on mangroves, which are the trees of the ocean that absorb carbon. We've seen the effects of oil spills on ocean. The ocean is supposed to be a carbon sink. So if we don't have healthy oceans, if we have oil polluted oceans and we have dilapidated mangroves, where's our carbon supposed to be stored? How can we achieve net zero if we don't have mangroves, if we have oil polluted water bodies? So we talked about the need for a national strategy on mangroves restoration and a possible partnership with the private sector in terms of restoring mangroves. This leads me to the answers to our second question, which was the role of the private sector in the transition to net zero through the blue economy. We talked about market incentives. Government can provide incentives to shipping companies because shipping companies, they are private sector individuals. They're going to look at the cost. At what cost are we going to be environment friendly? They've typically had the argument that being environment friendly is not a very profit-making thing for them. So we can give them, the government can give them incentives, can give them possible tax breaks as well. So that they can use low carbon fuels like liquefied natural gas, biofuels possibly as well. We also talked about the expanded partnership committee on blue economy, which the permanent secretary had referenced before, and how this will allow the diverse players in the industry, including private sector, to be able to come in and help in driving the blue economy and hopefully the net zero strategies of Nigeria. And lastly, in terms of the private sector aspect, we talked about also looking at mangrove restoration as a tourist attraction, from a tourist attraction perspective, using the reference of the Amazons of Brazil, which are used as a tourist attraction. So that is also an encouragement to get private sector and also indigenous communities to work together to revive mangroves and also create wealth for indigenous communities in Nigeria. And then last but not the least is awareness creation on the resources of our oceans and the need to keep our oceans healthy. Our ocean is not a dump site, and we need to advocate and let people understand the kind of limitations that we have when our oceans are not treated properly. So if we want to achieve net zero, we have to have healthy oceans. The oceans absorb our carbon. We have to have sustainable shipping practices. We have to have renewed mangroves. We also have to have private sector involvement. So thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. And there's a big smile on my face hearing some of the words I shared during your session. Thank you very much, Chiamaka. I will reach out to you personally, and then we can talk more around the blue economy and some of the work that we're doing. Thank you so much for that brief summary. And I will jump to my Egbon and my bros. I would like to call on Dr. Itwa to please support us and share summary on conversations during the circular economy and energy transition breakout session. Over to you, Dr. Itwa.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
We are looking at your table, sir.
Come again?
We are looking at your table.
Why are you looking on my table?
Because that's what your camera is showing.
What's my?
Okay, then.
I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's okay. You can go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just quickly say, because I know it's past the hour now when we are supposed to draw the curtain. Just to say that we looking at it from the angle we had taken in circular economy, and of course energy was added, and then forest, recall. One of the key issues raised for us, first and foremost, was the issues of waste. And interestingly, waste is part of the NDC sector. And that at present, in terms of, it provides, in terms of energy supply, biomass, looking at the biomass sector, it contributes zero to the energy supply as we know in the country. And indeed, for the fact that we need so much energy, it's unfortunate that at present it's not contributing anything to the entire energy mix. We need more of this in terms of it has a high energy potential, and so there's need to give more attention to that. And the energy transition that we talked about, it was recognized that it appears generally, there is a low level of awareness amongst the private sector players, among the government institutions. So there is need to further understand what the energy transition actually means. For instance, it was also said, should we actually close out our oil and gas facilities? Is that what energy transition means? It was reiterated time and over that no, that is not what it means. That's when we continue to a large extent be dependent. On the oil and gas sector, the players, they are already moving themselves towards the net zero plan. And a number of them had actually declared that, as you already know, and they are developing their plans and policies around all of that. So for us as a nation, it is not all about shutting down all our facilities, no. But then what we must take into consideration is that a time will come if we fail to develop our markets internally. A time will come where we will not have any person to deal with. So in other words, we must first and foremost create an enabling environment for the private sector. We should encourage them through, for instance, tax incentives, which unfortunately, that is not the way it is today. And it was mentioned that those in the marginal oil and marginal field for the oil and gas, and of course, the agricultural sector, they should be encouraged so that we have huge potential from all of them to see that those sectors are well managed and well developed to support the transition that we all are looking at. One other thing that was mentioned is, again, the hand-holding those that are not even part of this discussion. You have others that are not part of the discussion today, who, by what they do, also emit the emissions we're talking about. Do they know about the things we're talking about? How can we encourage them? We should not leave them behind. One last thing that was talked about was the policy issues. How do we ensure that the policy development, the plans we're developing, support homegrown technology? If, for instance, we have the challenge of bringing forests, we have it just as we are having today, where would that leave us? If the people as we are having today decide to go and not deal with leading activities and technologies, and they refuse to deal with us, what do we do? So what we have now at present, can we actually use it to galvanize our development quickly, make so much money? It was said that about $48 trillion was made from January till now. I think Saudi Arabia was mentioned from the gas field. What is Nigeria doing? Can we also quickly accelerate our activities? But the key thing here that we must give attention to is homegrown markets, which we do not have. We need to accelerate our activities in that area. And so the strategy we're developing, we also want to see how part of that is embedded. Critical question, where are the infrastructure for all that we're talking about? So the long and short of it is, as much as we have these resources, we want to see that we put the right policies in place so that we develop them to the benefit of Nigerians. If we do that, the market itself will become more attractive to us as a nation, and perhaps to those who are out there to support all that we're doing. So those are the few points where we marshal out. But the critical thing here we do not want to leave out is that nature continues to appear prominently in all we're doing. In our economy, nature features prominently. We should not leave the forest behind. We want to take it and then really work with that. And again, taking it from the biomass angle, it serves as fuel for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Itwa. That was also very, very elaborate. I around the role and how we manage, circular economy, forestry, and also energy transition. You and I will agree that there's a huge problem around forestry and energy transition, particularly in the remote areas. And then I think that the growth of clean cooking methods, like you have a few companies from the NCIC who have proved out solutions on green cooking methods, and the benefits of briquette production, which is the fueling, the fuel needed for the green cooking solutions. I think that we have another market, we have another economy that we can scale here. Circular economy exists everywhere. As long as there's a production, there's bound to be waste. And so at every given point in time, this waste also has a lot of opportunities or potential to become another resource for things. So you can look at it from every economy that there's a waste, from metal to wood, to agriculture, to food, to oil, plastics, textile, leather, as long as there's a production happening somewhere. By leather now, I mean skin leather, not Nigerian nylon leather. So thank you very much, Dr. Eugene, and thank you for everyone who have participated in this program. We've called for questions, so please, can you drop your question? We've got about 11 minutes for us to drop the clock, to stop the clock. So if you've got a question, Dr. Eugene here, Chiamaka is here, I am here, and our panelists are also here, so that we can answer your questions and also put a little clarifications to it. So if you've got a question, please post it on the group, or then you can raise your hand. Post it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand for a quick 20 seconds question, and then someone will take it up from there. Thank you very much. So in the light of that, we think that the green economy is a very emerging and a growth related economy that gives you opportunity to be able to create possibilities in areas where they have not been deemed fit before. So with the different conversations that have been had around water, which is the blue economy strategy, and also around circular economy, at this rate, we think that there's a whole new opportunity on how digital economy also helps to facilitate all these different new economies. So as the green economy grows, digitalization and also automation of processes also follows. And these are the likely, possible and critical ways that we can reduce, waste and, energy consumption, and also be able to manage and mitigate the different climate change economies, or rather challenges that we have faced across in Nigeria. It's about a minute or so. No hands have been raised and no questions have been dropped. In the middle, like someone said, answer, silence means what? Approval. I think that's the word. Anyway, please drop your questions and let's get these conversations going. And then we can get our panelists to answer you. And our breakout session leaders or leads will also support in sharing clarification around areas where you need. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I believe that most of us spoke during the breakout sessions. So in the light of all the conversations and all the additions and insights and ideas that have been shared so far, I want to thank everyone, from our guest speakers, to our panelists and our session leads, and all of our friends, both in government, private sector, public sector, development sector, and co. We want to thank you for your time that you have shared with us this afternoon. And we will love to see you another time when the NESG hosts one of its conversations. And hopefully I'll be there also to guide you in this space. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a very good afternoon. And let's keep the hope alive. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.